I think it's important to understand we are in the midst of perhaps one of the biggest revolutions of our time. Most of the other revolutions have happened in the past, and they've been very easy to spot because they've happened around the world, and you've been able to tell across countries, across borders. But this is a disruptive force that we're dealing with, which is actually happening around the world at the same time. And you wonder why, what is happening at this point in time that is causing this technological revolution to happen. It's very hard to spot a revolution when you're in the midst of it. It's sort of like your niece who said, you're BG, you're before Google, and she can tell that there is a revolution going on. Most of us cannot. If you think about what's happening around the world, there are technological forces that are conspiring to make this revolution happen. The first and foremost thing is we are beginning to see ubiquity in terms of internet access. And I know India does not see that just about yet, but there's 1.8 billion people around the world connected to the internet. There are about 4 billion people connected via mobile phones. If you look at that and say you talk to most people, say 1.8 billion people in the case, that's still only about 25% of the world's population. There's still 75% of the world's population to go. If you look at it differently, though, that's over 90% of the world's GDP. So today, over 90% of the world's GDP is connected to the internet, i.e., if it was a country by itself, it would be the largest GDP country around the world where people would share similar beliefs, similar behaviors, and perhaps similar preferences over time. The other interesting trend that is going on is a trend around storage. If you look at, most people today have iPods. An iPod today can store 80 gigabytes worth of information. If you follow Moore's law and if you follow Kreider's law, an iPod in 10 years from now can possibly store the entire content created in the last 100 years on one iPod in 10 years from now. There's a very interesting trend that is going on in storage, which makes it very, very cheap for us to store data going forward. The third interesting trend of technology that is going on is all of us are actually carrying the tools of production of content in our hands. So in the past, if you worked in the newspaper business, you worked in the television business, you had to have nice little cameras and a whole bunch of fancy equipment. Today, I was noticing earlier in the morning, people are sitting from this audience taking pictures and tweeting and writing updates on Facebook. So you're actually creating content on the fly. You have the tools of production in your hand. If you take all these three trends together, we're actually at a point where people call this the internet. And it's very hard to characterize the internet because any characterization of the internet sort of short sells the internet. The challenge we have is we at Google are often held synonymous to the internet. People believe that Google is responsible for the internet, which is good most of the times when people say, I love Google and I use your products. It is hard because very often we get held responsible for some of the sweeping changes that are going on around the world, in the world of business, in the world of social media, in the world of advertising, et cetera, et cetera. So if you look at where we are, from our perspective, the internet is the world's largest information, communication, and distribution network. If you look at information, 10 years ago, when you went on the internet or when you wanted to find information, you did a search, you found information, and you were happy if you found an old brochure or an old piece of marketing from a company. You were so excited you found it. Today, people's expectations are a lot higher. The bar has been raised. I was sitting in the audience early in the morning, and somebody stood up and asked a question, and I didn't know who that person was, so I Googled it. And my expectation was that this person must be on the internet, and therefore I should be able to find that person in less than a minute and figure out who she or she is. So our expectations have changed tremendously. Where things break down today, I expect to be able to go on the internet and be able to find that information that gives me the answer I'm looking for. If you look at it from a different perspective, about 5 exabytes of information was created by 2003. 1 exabyte is roughly 40,000 hours of television viewing. Today, we create 5 exabytes every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, we create 5 exabytes of information. Right? So we're creating over 100 exabytes of information. If you believe that, we get about 3 billion searches a day from around the world, from 1.8 billion people. They're constantly looking for information. The risk we run is we will have an oversupply of information and we won't be able to find it. Right? So we have a huge information challenge ahead of us because one of the big risks of this is we're going to end up with a lost culture in many parts of the world, where a lot of the information is in libraries, is in old videos, and old archives, and most of our kids are not going to want to go to a library because their way of dealing with information is they're going to go to the internet and try and find the information. So the internet is one of the world's largest information networks. It is also one of the world's largest communication networks. If you look at today, 250 million people are connected by Facebook. You know, there's about 200 billion emails that cross the wires every day. There's over 1 billion people connected by instant messenger or Skype or some form of Google Talk or MSN or Yahoo or AIM. 1 billion people. People are beginning to use this network, or people use this network to communicate with each other. Right? It is one of the world's largest communication networks. This is going to change the way and shape that we deal with the telecommunication world. If you look at its characteristics as a distribution network, there's over $300 billion worth of commerce that is conducted on the internet around the world. We use the internet today to distribute pretty much everything. Movies, music, any form of digital content. Over 60% of the people who use the internet say they've used the internet at some point in their lives to either go look for information before they go buy something. So it is the world's largest distribution network. Now, I remember a story 20 years ago when I used to work, even before that, when I went to the university in India. I remember having one PCXT in my university and one ICL 1904 mainframe. For those of you who are old enough to remember what an ICL 1904 was, you had to go program on a punch card. And I went to university, and the punch card machine was broken that semester when I took the computer science course. So we programmed without knowing what we were programming. We'd have to wait till the results came out. Right? If you look 20 years hence, my daughter does not understand how the world existed without computers. Right? And that's the revolution I'm talking about. This is going to be the world's largest information communication distribution network going forward. And that's going to change the shape of pretty much everything that we deal with. It is going to change the shape of business. Yes, it is. Unfortunately, if you look outside of India, if you look outside some of the emerging worlds, you're seeing a big shift in almost every industry. If you look at the world of media, you know, newspaper subscriptions are falling because people are going to the internet to get their information and get their content. If you look at the world of television, 20 years ago, there were 100 programs in the UK which had 15 million viewers or more. Today there are 3, and 2 of them are live football games. The third one is one program has lasted out of 100 in terms of the audience that it generates. So you're beginning to see people are beginning to use the internet more and more as a way of getting their content, as a way of getting their information, as a way of conducting commerce. And it is changing the cost structures of almost every industry. Perhaps the commodity industry might be safe for a while, but you take any industry, whether it is the media industry, the publishing industry, or it is the e-commerce industry. And it is going to end up being a very disruptive force. In the modern world, we're going to find about 50% of the businesses are going to go through some serious transformation in the next 10 years as a consequence of this. If you could look at the world of social media, I was in Japan on my way over here 2 days ago, and I met the Minister of Telecom, and they called this the year they won the election because of YouTube. Because all of the politicians have actually been on YouTube and been canvassing with their constituencies using online video. Obama had a very strong campaign where he actually had a Facebook manager. He had a team of people who used to manage his profile on Facebook, and a bunch of people who were creating networks on Facebook to be able to reach the voters in the US. But he had the largest online digital marketing campaign that any election in the world ever has had. So the world of social media is not just restricted to me finding out who my friends are. It is a world where you're beginning to see this new word called crowdsourcing, or engagement with almost everybody out on the street. So that's what Facebook and that's what Twitter and that's what the various social media platforms are going to allow us to do. That is not only going to change the face of business, it is going to change the face how society interacts with each other. If you take that concept, apply that to other parts of the world, you'll see it is creating a revolution in the world of advertising as well. Today we see roughly 1 billion views of videos on YouTube. We get 20 hours of video uploaded every minute on YouTube. 20 hours of video, which is uploaded on YouTube every minute. There's a $600 billion advertising industry, of which about 200 billion plus is the television business. And there is no advertising right now, pretty much, to talk about in the video world on the web. over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a significant shift of the advertising monies which are going to go from the television business to the business of the online world. And all these changes are in front of us. So, going forward, people ask you, where is the internet going? What is going to happen? I don't think we've barely scratched the surface. We're just at the beginning of this phase. We're going to see lots and lots of changes happen. If you take that and say, where are we going to end up in a few years from now? I think we're going to end up in a world we're going to see more than, the aspiration or the target is that pretty much anybody in the world is going to be connected to the internet in some way, shape, or form, whether it is going to be with their PC or their mobile phone. I think if you follow that trend, you're going to see tremendous shift in everything that we do. Within that context, if you look at where we are in India, I'm somewhat disappointed at the progress we've made. Our internet penetration is actually equivalent to those of Kenya and other parts of Africa as opposed to parts of the developed world. China has 25% internet penetration with 340 million people. The US has 240 million people, putting China as the most connected country in the world. And it's interesting, Rwanda, which in 1994 had no concept of where this world is going, they are actually rolling out a national wireless LAN network, and they're putting in billions of dollars of building the best fiber network in Africa. Korea, when they had the big crisis 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they went and said they mandated they were going to have 1 gigabytes per second for every person in the country. Now they've mandated in 2012 they're going to have 100 gigabits per second, and their GDP has tripled in that time frame. Finland has just passed a law saying they're going to have universal broadband access for everyone in the country as a right. And there's a very clear correlation between the investment in infrastructure and the increase of broadband penetration or the increase of access to the internet and economic growth. Every 10% increase in penetration creates 1% increase in GDP. In that context, I think we have a long way to go as far as this country is concerned in terms of being able to invest in infrastructure. In addition to that, I think the other part we need to do here is, I told you the story about programming on an ICL 1904. Despite that, half of the people I went to university with today are creating software for some of the best companies in the world. And if you were able to create the inspiration and create the infrastructure for people to be able to do that over here,